We'll wait. Magandang umaga po. Magandang umaga po, annyeonghaseyo. Welcome to today's event, Talk on Asian Languages. I'm your moderator, Mark Chavez. The Talks on Asian Languages, or TAL series, serves as an avenue for faculty members, alumni, and affiliates of the UP Department of Linguistics to share their research on second language learning and acquisition, as well as studies in comparative structural features of Asian languages. Each lecture focuses on linguistics and pedagogical trends can be employed and adapted to fit the learning needs of Filipino students. Other practical applications of linguistic studies on Asian languages, such as translation, interpretation, language learning materials, development, and language planning, are also covered in these lectures. Today's installment is co-organized by the UP Department of Linguistics and the UP Korea Research Center. The UP Department of Linguistics is an academic institution under the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, which is distinctly focused on the scientific study, preservation, and promotion of Philippine languages and dialects through teaching, archiving, research, and publication. It is also mandated to use its research and expertise such as language issues in the country. Aside from Philippine linguistics, the department is also recognized as an expert in teaching of the languages of Asia. It is designated as a Center of Excellence in Foreign Language by the Philippines Commission on Higher Education. UPKRC, or University of the Philippines Korea Research Center, is a university-wide Korean studies hub that aims to provide Filipino scholars and researchers with opportunities to widen their interest in Korean studies. The center aims to be a venue for scholars and practitioners to produce meaningful comparative research and to promote collaborative partnerships among Korean and Philippine institutions. The center sponsors interdisciplinary and intercollege research and educational activities on Korean studies, as well as facilitates the training of next generation of Koreanists in the country. To formally begin our program, let us welcome UP Department of Linguistics Chairperson, Dr. Maria Cristina Gallego, for opening remarks.
All right, thank you very much, everyone who are here. Thank you for coming despite the awful weather today. We really appreciate your presence. Special mention to Korean Cultural Center for coming here and the participants from King Sejong Institute. The Faculty of UP Linguistics and the Office of International Linkages UP Diliman, as well as, of course, our speakers, our visitors today from Kyunghee University, who are going to talk about the Korean-Foreign Language Parallel Corpus project. So, as part of the Talks on Asian Languages lecture series organized by the UP Department of Linguistics, as part of our centennial celebration. So, recently we have finished our 15th Philippine Linguistics Congress, where we had several presentations on language research as well as language education. So today, of course, this is still a part of our centennial celebration. So the Talks on Asian Languages series is focused primarily on Asian language teaching of particularly from mentors and lecturers from the UP Department of Linguistics. But we have also invited speakers from foreign institutions, such as we had a speaker who talked about Japanese language education, the situation of Bahasa Malaysia, for example, and now, of course, we're going to hear a lecture on the Korean Parallel Corpus project. So, without further ado, I welcome everyone to today's event. We also welcome our participants who are joining us virtually through StreamYard. So this is live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. So we hope you will find today's lectures insightful, and hopefully you will also be able to use the things shared today for your own research. So welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gallego, for the warm greetings. To introduce the speaker, for this installment of TAL, we have two speakers from ongoing Korean-Foreign Language Parallel Corpus project. First, we have Dr. Kyunghee Lee, Kyunghee 교수님, Head Professor of Korean Language Education as Foreign Language, Graduate School of Education, Kyunghee University. Currently, she is also the project convener of the Korean-Foreign Language Parallel Corpus Construction Project, National Institute of Korean Language. Her research interests include Korean language learner error, curriculum and teaching materials development, Korean language education for overseas Koreans, corpus construction, and natural language processing research, among others. Second, Dr. Aldrin Lee is Associate Professor at the Department of Linguistics, UP Department. His teaching and research areas include grammatical description, morphosyntactic analysis, generative grammar, ethnolinguistics, linguistic fieldwork and language documentation, lexicography and Korean linguistics and cultural studies. He has published articles in several journals, including Philippine Social Science Review, Cognition, and Journal of Global and Area Studies. He is the current president of the Linguistic Society of the Philippines. Dr. Jung-hee Lee of Kyunghee University in Seoul will introduce objectives, potential, and process involved in building the Korean Foreign Language Parallel Corpus. For her lecture, linguistics faculty Dr. Kyunghee Lee will assist in interpreting Dr. Lee's presentation. Let us
안녕하세요. 경희대학교 이정희라고 합니다. 반갑습니다.
This is Dr. Jung Lee from Kyunghee University, Seoul, Korea.
네, 필리핀 대학 100주년을 맞이해서 이런 심포지움에 강의를 할 수 있게 해주셔서 정말 영광이고 감사합니다.
In celebration of the centenary of UP Department of Linguistics, I am honored to be here to give a lecture.
오늘 제가 말씀드릴 내용은 국립국어원에서 주관하고 있는 한국어, 외국어, 병렬 말뭉치 사업에 대한 소개, 특히 필리핀어를 중심으로 말씀드리겠습니다.
So today I will talk about the Korean Foreign Language Parallel Corpus project funded by the National Institute of Korean Language. Especially, I will focus on Korean-Filipino Parallel Corpus project.
네, 먼저 이 사업의 주관 부서인 국립국어원의 홍보 영상을 잠깐 시청하시겠습니다.
So first of all, let us watch a short video of National Institute of Korean Language.
We dream of a world where everyone can communicate easily. A place where the Korean language, our greatest heritage and source of culture, is made to be easy to use. This is the National Institute of Korean Language.
한국어 관련된 것만 알고 있어서 잘 모르겠는데.
표준어 정하는 곳 아니에요?
사전 만드는 곳으로 알고 있어요.
거기 맞춤법 물어보면 알려주던데요.
The National Institute of Korean Language administers research and analysis activities on the Korean language and implements various language policies so that people can lead a smooth and refined language life. With the objective of developing the Korean language to be easy and convenient, the Institute creates realistic language standards. It also systematizes knowledge of the Korean language into a dictionary and strives to strengthen linguistic welfare for the underprivileged. The Institute researches the actual conditions of the public's use of language and approves language norms based on the research, thereby making an effort to establish the Korean language correctly. The Institute is steadily to cultivate the Korean language abundantly and applying meaningful changes occurring in practical usage to the language norms by which the Institute continuously develops and manages it. Also, the Korean dictionary is being compiled to systematically organize our knowledge and culture embodied in the Korean language, allowing a rich and convenient language life. Standard Korean language dictionary that was published in 1999 has been transformed into an internet dictionary in 2008. Urimase, a wiki dictionary of the Korean language, is a compilation of knowledge and culture of the Korean language gathered and organized by all. The multilingual dictionaries are 10 different translations of the basic Korean dictionary, all of which support foreigners learning Korean. The National Institute of Korean Language develops Korean into a more convenient and refined language. It allows smooth communication between people and the government by improving the language used in public institutions to be easier and more correct. Along with promoting a more refined Korean language in various fields, the Institute also sets the language standards and creates a stable language environment so that teenagers can enjoy a proper language culture. In addition, the Korean Language Culture Academy is being systematized and diverse study courses are being developed. Through various communication paths, such as phones, social media, and online bulletin boards, the Institute is quickly resolving questions regarding the Korean language. Through projects like language integration of North and South Korea, Korean language education for foreigners, and support for linguistically underprivileged groups, the basis of Korean language is expanding. For smooth communication between North and South Koreans in a unified Korea, the Institute researches language integration and promotes exchange, as well as providing language education for North Korean refugees. Furthermore, the Institute conducts basic research and educational material development regarding Korean language education and grants qualification to Korean language teachers, as well as providing workshop training. In particular, the Institute is standardizing and popularizing Braille and sign language so that people with visual or hearing impairment can enjoy a convenient language environment. The Institute is also supporting education for children in low-income brackets. Where the Korean language is correct. Clearly established, beautifully developed, and solidly expanded. The National Institute of Korean Language. By implementing language policies that consider the future, by developing the Korean language so that it lives and breathes in our everyday lives, and by realizing the happiness of the people through smooth communication. The Institute will provide hope to Korea.
네, 국립국어원에서 하고 있는 다양한 사업 중에 오늘 제가 말씀드릴 부분은 국립국어원에서 2021년부터 주력하고 있는 사업입니다.
There are various programs that are funded by National Institute of Korean Language, and one of the key activities that is what I will talk about today.
네, 이 사업의 이름은 한국어 외국어 병렬 말뭉치 구축 사업입니다. 그리고 이번이 3차 사업인데요. 3차 사업은 5월 15일부터 올해 29일까지 12월 29일까지 진행이 됩니다.
So the title of this project is Korean-Foreign Language Parallel Corpus Project, and currently it's in the third phase, which started on May 15, which last until December 29 this year.
네, 이 사업의 최종적인 목표는 한국어와 같은 언어 자료가 자동 번역이나 그런 문화 산업에 도움이 되는 성장 동력으로 한국에서 구축할 수 있기 위해서 진행하는 것입니다.
So the project goal of this project is to establish of high quality Korean foreign language parallel corpus that can be used for AI or artificial intelligence translation, and also used for culture industry.
네. 그래서 이 사업에 대해 잠시 말씀드리면 첫 번째로는 저희가 하는 일이 말뭉치를 어떻게 구축하는지 구축 체계와 그리고 그 말뭉치의 번역 수준이 정확한지에 대한 검증 체계를 수립하는 것이고 두 번째는 이 8개의 언어가 있는데요. 8개의 언어를 다 합쳐서 1100만 단어, 어절의 병렬 말뭉치를 구축하는 것입니다.
So this project is basically to establish the parallel corpus of the 8 languages you are looking on the screen, and this is to construct 11 million word Korean foreign language parallel corpus.
네, 8개 언어가 궁금하실 것 같은데요. 필리핀어를 포함하고 있고 그 외에도 북방의 언어로 러시아어와 우즈베키스탄어를 제외하고는 대부분 아시아 언어입니다. 그래서 힌디어, 베트남어, 인도네시아어, 태국어를 포함하고 있습니다.
So 8 languages include Vietnamese, Indonesian, Thai, Indian Hindi, Cambodian Khmer, and Philippine Tagalog, Russian, and Uzbek. So as you see, most languages are from Asia, and some North Asian languages, Central Asian languages are also included.
네, 그래서 이런 병렬 말뭉치를 구축하고 올해는 저희가 이 말뭉치를 잘 활용하기 위해서 검색기를 새롭게 개발하고 있습니다. 그래서 그 샘플 검색기를 만들고 있는데 그 부분에 대한 것과 마지막으로는 올해 12월 8일에 저희가 워크숍을 하나 진행을 합니다. 그때 이 8개 언어 중에서 한 4-5개 언어의 병렬 말뭉치 활용에 대한 결과들을 발표하게 됩니다.
So this year, in continuation of the project, we are also working on developing search engine to use these languages. And on December 8th this year, we will also conduct the workshop.
네, 8개 언어가 어떻게 선정됐는지 궁금하실 것 같은데요. 필리핀어는 왜 거기에 포함이 되었을까? 예, 궁금하시죠? 당연히 들어가야 된다라고 생각을 하실 텐데 첫 번째는 매력도입니다. 그러니까 매력도라고 하는 것은 이 언어를 사용하는 인구가 얼마나 되는지, 그리고 경제 규모가 얼마만큼인지, 그리고 한국과의 교류가 어느 정도 규모인지에 대한 부분이고요. 준비도가 두 번째인데 이것은 이런 사업을 하기 위해서 구축되어 있는 말뭉치가 어느 정도 있는지, 그리고 가장 중요한 부분은 저희가 병렬 말뭉치를 구축하는데 검수를 하고 감수를 해줄 한국어를 잘 할 줄 아는 필리핀 모화자가 확보되어 있는지, 이 부분이 저희가 사업하면서도 굉장히 중요하고 핵심적인 부분이라고 할 수 있겠습니다. 그리고 네 번째는 이렇게 병렬로 구축된 말뭉치가 사업적으로 그리고 문화적으로도 가치가 있게 잘 활용될 수 있는지, 이러한 3가지 기준으로 필리핀어가 선정이 되었습니다.
So everyone should be very curious how the languages are selected, and I'm very sure Filipino is one of the crucial languages to be included. So there are 3 criteria. First is attractiveness, such as population, economic scale, and then how the countries are having exchanges for years. And then second is level of readiness, how the corpus holdings and how the manpower, especially those who can translate, who are fluent in Korean and target language, exist. And then lastly, third is business feasibility, how the business easiness and other factors, especially how the corpus can be used as culturally valued item in the end.
네, 그래서 타갈로그어를 살펴봤을 때는, 필리핀어를 살펴봤을 때는 일단 필리핀어를 사용하고 있는 인구가 6,500만 명 정도로 규모가 굉장히 많은 언어이고요. 그리고 처음에 필리핀어를 구축하려고 할 때 반대했던 사람들이 그 나라는 영어로 다 의사소통할 수 있는데 왜 필리핀어를 해야 하냐라고 했을 때 이 필리핀어를 사용하는 인구가 6,500만 명에 달한다는 점, 이 설득의 한 근거가 됐고요. 그리고 한국과 필리핀의 무역량이 굉장히 많기 때문에 한국에도 큰 영향을 미치는 국가입니다. 아세안 회원국 중에서 굉장히 그 상위권에 무역량도 그렇고 체류하는 인원을 봤을 때도 상위권에 달하는 아주 중요한 국가이기도 하고요. 그리고 영어와 다르게 필리핀어가 가지고 있는 독자적인 문법적인 특성, 그리고 어휘적인 다양성, 이런 것들이 이 언어를 꼭 병렬 말뭉치를 구축해야 한다라는 근거가 되었습니다.
So these are the particular reasons why Filipino or Philippine Tagalog was chosen as one of the languages, because we found out that 65 million Filipino speakers exist who are speaking the language, and Filipino cannot be substituted by English. And then Korean-Philippine diplomatic relations, especially trading relations, also played a key importance as it ranks on the fourth among ASEAN member countries that has trade exchange with Korea. And then lastly, the uniqueness of grammar and vocabulary of Philippine Tagalog is also another reason.
네, 본격적으로 말뭉치 구축이 어떤 과정을 통해 이루어지는지 말씀드리겠습니다. 우선은 국립국어원에서 이 사업을 기획하고 그리고 예산을 확보하고 있고요. 그 외에도 여러 가지 자문위원회에서 의견들을 주고 계십니다. 저희가 크게는 이렇게 5가지 파트로 이루어져서 일을 진행하고 있는데 자료를 수집하는 팀이 있습니다. 그래서 올해 데이터 같은 경우는 이미 국립국어원에서 구축해 놓은 모두의 말뭉치에 있는 자료를 활용해서 번역을 하고 있습니다. 두 번째 단계가 번역을 할 수 있게끔, 말뭉치로 구축할 수 있게끔 자료들을 정제하는 단계입니다. 그래서 이 정제는 기계로 정제하는 단계가 있고 사람이 직접 보고 정제하는 단계, 그리고 다시 전문가들이 모든 내용들을 어문 규정부터 맞춤법까지 확인하는 그런 3단계로 정제는 이루어집니다. 그리고 이제 본격적으로 번역이 들어가게 되고요. 번역은 플리토라는 회사에서 진행을 하는데 이따가 관심 있는 분들은 제가 나눠드리겠습니다. 이 회사가 각 전 세계의 한국어와 관련된 언어 데이터들을 많이 보유하고 있고, 그리고 특히 병렬 말뭉치를 구축해서 자동 번역을 회사 플랫폼에서 자체적으로도 진행을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이 플리토에서 번역을 담당하고 있고, 그리고 본격적으로 저희 사업팀에서는 검수원들에게, 그러니까 전문적인 능력을 가진 그런 배경민 선생님이 저희 팀장이시거든요. 배경민 선생님의 시험에 통과된 그 기준에 맞는 검수원들이 번역이 제대로 되었는지 한국어와 필리핀어를 병렬상을 검수하는 검수 작업을 진행하는 단계고, 그게 가장 중요한 단계입니다. 그리고 검수원들이 제대로 잘 하고 있는지 팀장님께서 또 재검수를 진행하게 되고, 마지막으로 감수도 있는데 저희가 알드린 리 교수님께서, 필리핀 언어학과의 알드린 리 교수님께서 아주 꼼꼼하게 마지막에 감수 과정을 하고 계십니다. 이렇게 한 4차례에 걸쳐서 이것이 번역이 대응상이 아주 정확하지는 않더라도 저희가 제일 중요하게 생각하는 건 의미적 오류가 없이 번역이 되었는지에 대한 점검을 하고 있고, 실제로 그 결과를 가지고 필리핀의 플리토에서 이름이 비슷하네요. 오늘 보니까 플리토에서 실제로 우즈베키스탄 언어는 자동 번역과 관련된 지금 그 어떤 도구를 개발을 하고 있습니다. 자체적으로. 그래서 양이 많지는 않지만 저희가 지금까지 한 것이 그것이 그래도 굉장히 정확도가 대규모 말뭉치에 이를 정도로 수준이 높다. 그러니까 그 얘기는 우리 사업단에서 만든 그 검수된 말뭉치의 질이 굉장히 고품질이다라고 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다.
So as the outline shows, this project is funded by the National Institute of Korean Language and then supervised by various groups, as you see in the chart. And then we will see how the work is done. So from the collection team square in the left side, this year, the data comes from NIKL corpus, and then after the data is collected, original text is refined. And then there are 3 processes by machine, humans, and linguists and experts. And then after the data is refined, data is also provided by Flito. Flito is a private company that has built a strong data of different languages corpus. So later on, I will also introduce Flito to all of you. And then given the data set, translation review team, which is called in Korean 검수, is conducted. So there are a number of translation review personnels, and then there are head personnel, and then there will. This is the most important process among the procedure. And then after review is done, there will be also supervision, another layer, and then the platform is platform by the Flito will review for the quality control purpose. So we are doing almost 4 layers of review, supervision, and other quality control. So we are quite confident, as in Uzbekistan, they also developed their own corpus system based on our project.
네, 다음으로 필리핀어는 한국어를 잘하는 번역가들을 모으기가 굉장히 어려웠던 언어입니다. 그래서 플리토라는 회사에서 한국어 번역 챌린지라는 프로모션 내지는 행사를 진행을 했었는데요. 이때 필리핀 대학 학생들이 많이 참여를 해서 이렇게 3분의 번역가들을 플리토에서 채용을 해서 실제 번역에 참여를 하고 있습니다. 플리토 행사에 8개 나라 언어에서 다 참여를 했는데 이렇게 번역에 참여하게 된 언어는 필리핀이 유일합니다.
So among 8 languages, Filipino was one of the languages that was very hard to find a fluent speaker who can translate and review the sentences. But we are very fortunate to have these UP graduates and UP students. You can see 3 names on the screen who participated in the translation challenge organized by Flito.
네, 다음으로는 번역과 검수, 감수 절차를 간단하게 보여드리겠습니다. 지금 이 보시는 화면은 플리토 플랫폼에서 일반인들이 자기 번역 수준을 인증하고 나면은 참여할 수 있는 플랫폼 내에서 번역 절차입니다.
So this screen shows the Flito platform screenshot. How any ordinary people can translate and have their sentence proofread on the platform.
이렇게 누군가가 번역을 하고 나면 다른 사람이 들어와서 이 번역 품질에 대해서 체크를 하게 되고 이 노란색 그림 이상인 경우에 번역으로 채택이 되고 다시 수정하는 절차를 거칩니다.
So in the left side, someone wrote a Korean sentence, and then in the right side, you can see someone out of collective intelligence system on the Flito platform reviewed. And then if it passes yellow button, which is so level, the sentence will go through another review layer to be more clear and more accurate sentence.
네, 그래서 플리토에서도 그 회사 안에 필리핀어를 잘하는 전문가가 한 명이 있어서 번역되는 데이터들의 오류가 없는지 최근에 가장 많은 오류는 자동 번역기를 돌려서 그냥 번역한 건 아닌지 그런 것들을 검사하는 절차가 먼저 있습니다.
So as you see on the screenshot, Flinto also has their own language experts who will review the data and inspect if the data is good enough for the research.
저희 이제 검수원들이 본격적으로 검수를 하는 화면입니다. 그래서 검수된 것에 대해서 정말 통과가 되는지 굿인지 아니면 배든지 등급을 두어서 평가를 하고 소소 이상이 되면 소소부터는 옆에 이렇게 왜 이 문장이 소소인지 어떻게 고쳐야 되는지에 대해서 수정을 하고 있습니다.
So this screenshot shows the actual screenshot of how our personnel goes through the review. So this is the second inspection where the Filipino personnel goes to the platform and then they will decide red is bad and yellow so-so, green good. So they have to choose the quality of the sentence, and if it is below so-so level in the rightmost column, the personnel should correct and revise the sentence.
그리고 이제 이 화면이 팀장님들이 보시는 재검수 화면입니다. 그래서 팀장님들은 검수원들이 한 문장에 대해서 직접적으로 수정도 하고 그리고 반복적으로 나타나는 오류들은 직접 지도도 해주십니다.
So in this screenshot, this is the third inspection, which is re-reviewing 20% of sampling data. So this is done by head reviewers.
마지막으로 전문가 감수로서 각 그 현지에 대학에 계신 교수님들께서 감수해 주시는 화면입니다.
So this screenshot shows the supervision level, which re-reviews 10% of sampling data, and supervisors are chosen in professor level in foreign universities.
네. 저희 이제 수량과 관련된 부분인데요. 아까 앞서 말씀드렸듯이 영어는 없지만 저희가 영어를 같이 구축해서 국어원에 제공하고 있습니다. 그래서 최종 1242만 어절의 병렬 말뭉치를 구축합니다.
So English is not part of our data, but we also provide the sentence, the number of sentence in English to NIKL.
국립국어원에서 제공하고 있는 데이터가 엄청 많은데 그중에서 저희가 일부를 사용해야 되기 때문에 균형성을 중요하게 생각하고 있고요. 그리고 다양한 주제에 대해서 이야기하고 있는지 그 다양성까지 같이 고려해서 데이터를 선정을 하였습니다.
So how we collect the data is written and spoken data provided by the National Institute of the Korean Language. And then it also goes through purchase of YouTube transcripts and other sources.
네, 저희가 최종 병렬 말뭉치가 구축됐을 때 나오는 화면인데요. 한국어 원문이 있고 감수한 내용, 그리고 번역한 내용, 재검수된 내용이 차례대로 이렇게 전개가 됩니다.
So as you see on the screen, the sample and product data are shown. So if you see the Korean text from the left side to the right side, 원문 is original text, and then 감수, it was reviewed and supervised, and then 번역, translation, and then lastly, in the rightmost, 재검수, it will be re-reviewed.
이 화면이 제이슨이라는 형식의 파일 형식인데요. 그래서 번역이 되고 데이터가 완성이 되고 나면은 제이슨 형식의 파일로 국어원에 제출이 되고 선생님들이 필리핀어 병렬 말뭉치를 받을 때도 이러한 제이슨 형식의 파일로 받게 됩니다.
So on the screen, we can see a small table here. So from 1 to 6. Information is included for the ID of reviewers. So In number one, it's a type of corpus, and then number two is the genre of the corpus, and then number three is the layers of review, and then number four, PA means parallel corpus, and then number five, KO means the original text was Korean, and then number six shows 8 languages I explained earlier.
네, 이렇게 보시면은 병렬 말뭉치의 출발어 소스 랭귀지가 한국어고 타겟은 타갈로그어로 명시가 되어 있는 병렬 말뭉치를 저희가 구축해서 처음에 한국어 원문, 1차 번역문, 그리고 최종 감수된 번역문까지 함께 제공이 됩니다.
So as you see here, the bold letter shows source language is Korean, and then target language is Tagalog, and then inside the box you can see form, target, revision 1, revision 2. So you can see how it is refined and reviewed.
저희가 개발하고자 하는 용례 검색기의 모습인데요. 실제로 아까 보셨던 제이슨 파일은 보통 인문학을 하는 사람들은 보면은 아 몰라 하고 덮어버리는 형식입니다. 그래서 우리가 잘 알 수 있게끔 검색하고 검색한 결과가 이렇게 하단에 나오는 화면으로 지금 구성해서 개발하고 있고 올해 샘플을 개발하는 거고요. 내년에 사업이 된다면 좀 본격적으로 용례 검색기가 나올 예정입니다.
So this is the example of search tool we are working on right now. So in the previous slide, it looked quite complicated. So we are trying to make it more user friendly. So you can see how a certain word will appear in this search tool. So this year we are developing a sample, and hopefully next year we can work on further.
네, 이것이 이제 국립국어원의 모두의 말뭉치라는 화면인데요. 모두의 말뭉치에는 한국인들이 사용하고 있는 많은 구어 자료, 그리고 신문 자료, 말뭉치 자료들이 굉장히 많이 올라가 있습니다. 그중에 우리가 만든 이 8개 언어의 병렬 말뭉치도 이렇게 올라가 있고 여기에 보시면은 한국어, 필리핀, 타갈로그어의 병렬 말뭉치도 올라가 있어서 신청을 하면 받을 수 있습니다. 다운로드를 할 수 있습니다.
So on this slide, you can see everyone's corpus. You can find in Korean.go.kr, NIKL website, and then I just magnified in the red box. You can see this is Korean, Philippine, Tagalog corpus. So everyone's corpus of NIKL includes spoken data, newspaper, and other corpus. And this, our project, is one of the data you can find in their website as well.
네, 그래서 우리가 이런 사업을 통해서 얻고자 하는 기대 효과는 일단 한국에서 봤을 때도 영어와 중국어 자료는 굉장히 많습니다. 일본어도 거기에 포함될 수 있고요. 그래서 그런 언어를 제외한 한국과 가까운 나라의 언어 자원의 불균형을 해소하는 것이 가장 첫 번째 의의다라고 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다. 그리고 실제로 번역을 하는데 한계들이 많은데 이렇게 인공지능 번역기를 활용하게 되면 번역의 수준도 높아질 수밖에 없습니다. 1차적인 번역은 기계가 해주기 때문에 정말 고급 인력인 인간 번역가들은 조금 더 고급 수준의 번역을 할 수 있어서 번역 기술도 발전할 수 있다고 생각을 하고 있고요. 세 번째는 이제 저도 전공이 한국어 교육인데 이렇게 한국어와 외국어를 연결시켜서 할 수 있는 다양한 연구들을 할 수 있다는 것입니다. 이렇게 필리핀과 한국과 관련된 여러 가지 연구든 산업이든 이런 것들이 많아지면 교류도 더 확대될 수밖에 없고요. 제가 이렇게 와가지고 여러분들에게 이런 말을 하는 것도 그런 교류의 한 차원이라고 생각합니다. 그래서 우리가 시작할 때는 그냥 단순히 병렬 말뭉치를 구축하는 것이지만 최종적으로는 한국과 필리핀의 교류의 확대가 그것이 최종 목표가 아닐까라는 생각이 듭니다.
So these are some expectations I think are beneficial from our project. So the first, there are already ample information on English and Chinese and other languages. So we want to resolve the imbalance between Korean and some language resources. And then second is we hope to improve the quality of translation through the provided data and corpus. And then third is we can also activate collaborative Korean and foreign language research. And lastly, we can also aim expansion of political, economic, and cultural exchanges beyond our initial aim of the project.
네, 필리핀어 병렬 말뭉치를 구축하면서 저희 여기 현지에 계신 백영민 팀장님 그리고 알드린 리 저희 그 감수 교수님도 계시지만 여기에 한국학과에 계신 그 언어과에 계신 여러 교수님들도 계십니다. 회의를 아주 오래 길게 하시는데요. 무엇이 문제인가라고 했을 때 여러 가지 이야기들이 나오는데 일단은 아까도 말씀드렸듯이 1차적으로 번역을 하는 사람들이 많이 확보가 되지 않는다는 것이 문제입니다. 그래서 한국어를 이해하고 있어야 번역을 할 수 있으니까 예, 그 혹시 그런 거 아실지 모르겠는데 그 바나나 우유라고 단지 모양의 우유가 있습니다. 그래서 그게 우리는 단지 우유라고 부르거든요. 예, 바나나 우유인데 그래서 단지 우유 먹고 싶어라고 하는 문장을 어떤 나라의 그 번역가가 only milk라고 번역을 하는 그런 재미있는 이야기도 있습니다. 그래서 한국 문화를 알아야 또 번역을 제대로 할 수 있기 때문에 그런 인력들을 많이 구축해야 된다는 것이 있고요. 그리고 필리핀 타갈로그하고 한국어하고 한 문장이 한 문장으로 되는 1:1 번역 자체가 어려운 문장들도 굉장히 많다는 것입니다. 그래서 실제로 저희 병렬말뭉치 구축을 통해서 알드린 리 교수님하고 저희 전임연구원인 전지현 선생님이 논문을 지금 계속 발표를 하고 계시는데 그러한 병렬말뭉치를 통해서 향후 한국어 필리핀 번역의 어떤 좋은 방안 그리고 번역의 품질을 높일 수 있는 그런 연구들이 많아지기를 기대합니다.
So lastly, we also identified some problems. The biggest problem really is there are not enough fluent Korean speakers in the Philippines. So we hope we can develop manpower who can also support this project as using fluency and high performance of Korean language. And then due to the linguistic characteristics between Tagalog and Korean, one-on-one translation is not always easy. So we also have to research and we also have to study further on these two languages.
네, 오늘 원래 통역을 다른 분이 하기로 하셨는데 개인적인 사정으로 백영민 선생님이 갑자기 통역을 하셨는데 마치 준비한 것처럼 너무 잘해주셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다. 네, 이상으로 제 발표는 마치겠습니다.
The session is now open for questions and comments. Please introduce yourself with your affiliation before asking your questions. For those of you who are watching online, you may comment. You may post your questions in the comments and I will read them out. So starting with, I guess, our live audience. 안녕하세요. Any questions? Name and affiliation.
안녕하세요. 저는 필리핀 국립대학교에 김현이라고 합니다. 혹시 지금 그 AI 세대인 거 아시죠? 그래서 혹시 이 자료들을 사용해서 저작권 문제가 있으신가요? 아니면 그 자료를 사업적으로 사용할 수 있을까요?
The mentor of UP Diliman is asking if using the data is not breaking the rule of copyright issues.
국어원에서는 상업적으로 사용하는 것이 아니라면 회사에서도 AI의 성능을 높이는 데이터로 활용하는 것은 제공을 하고 있습니다. 그러니까 신청을 할 때 명확하게 목적을 밝히시고 하면은 공개를 해주니까 한번 신청을 해보시기 바랍니다.
So as long as the purpose of using our data is not commercial, you can use it. So when you apply for using of our data, you can clarify your purpose.
네. So even though I'm the moderator, if I may ask, compared to other languages in the study, what is the progress of Tagalog? So compared to Vietnamese or Indonesian.
다른 언어에 비해서 필리핀어는 어떻게 다른지.
다른 언어와 비해서 다른 거는 필리핀어가 가지고 있는 다양한 차이들이 있잖아요. 근데 그건 다른 언어도 마찬가지입니다. 그래서 제가 번역을 하면서 사업을 지금 3차 사업을 하고 있는데 제가 느낀 건 민족의 기질, 예, 그리고 문화 이런 차이가 가장 큰 것 같습니다. 번역을 저희가 목표를 세우고 번역을 해가는 속도 이런 것들을 맞추어서 가는 언어가 사실은 그렇게 많지 않고 팀 내에서 여러 그러니까 팀장님과 전임연구원이 되게 애를 쓰는 게 빨리 해주세요. 한국의 문화가 아니라 네, 이제 정해진 날짜에 뭔가 사업을 진행하는 데 있어서 그런 의사소통이 조금 어려운 것이 필리핀의 특징이라고 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다. 너무 솔직하게 말씀드립니다.
So each language has its own problems and strengths, and in terms of Philippine Tagalog, we have some kind of characteristics or personality of personnel who join because you know Koreans are always pali-pali and not always it works. So some communication and working on timeline is sometimes problematic, but it's not just Filipinos. So we will work hard.
안녕하세요. 저는 주 필리핀 한국문화원 세종학당에 이제 사회학연에 나온 현지아라고 합니다. 끊어서 말해볼까요?
So Miss Hyunji Ah from King Sejong Institute of Korean Cultural Center in the Philippines.
그래서 저는 이제 지금은 한국어 교원이지만 통번역사로도 일을 해와서 NC 소프트라는 게임 회사에서 이와 같은 이제 경력 포커스 구축을 인도네시아어랑 영어 쪽으로 이제 저도 관련 일을 해서 굉장히 관심 있게 들었습니다.
So I personally also worked in NCSoft, which developed parallel corpus of Indonesia and English.
그래서 저희 이제 세종학당에서 이번에 처음으로 약간 시범 운영으로 영어, 한국어 통번역 수업을 이제 시작하게 되었는데 이제 한국어 교육에 있어서 이런 지금 국립국어원에서 제공하는 그런 말뭉치를 어떤 식으로 조금 활용할 수 있는지 인사이트를 혹시 조금 주실 수 있을까요?
So this year, KCC Philippines for the first time is offering Korean English translation class. So I wish Dr. Lee can share some insights.
네, 가장 어려운 질문을 하셨는데 제가 계속 고민하는 게 그 부분입니다. 실제로 산업계에서는 굉장히 많이 활용을 하고 있고요. 이 데이터를 가져가서 자동 번역기 만드는 데도 하고 있고 하다못해 회사 매뉴얼도 만들고 여러 가지 하고 있습니다. 교육에는 어떤 필요와 그리고 활용이 있을까라고 생각했을 때 그래서 그 고민의 결과가 저 용례 검색기로 나온 건데요. 예를 들어서 하나의 한국어 부사를 필리핀어로 찾아봤을 때 어떤 단어로 대응되는지, 대응 양상이 단어 대 단어인지, 단어와 구로 대응이 되는지, 혹은 아예 대응이 불가능한지, 삭제되는 부분도 있더라고요. 그런 것들을 대규모로 살펴보면 실제로 번역을 하는 분에게도 도움이 되고 번역을 가르친다라고 한다면 그런 단어 단위별 용례들을 보여주면 학생들이 설명을 듣는 것보다는 훨씬 잘 이해할 수 있고 또한 예문들이 엄청 많습니다. 이 데이터의 속성이 구어가 60%이고 문어가 40%로 구성되어 있습니다. 그러니까 학생들이 원하는 입말에서 어떻게 말하는지에 대한 자료로도 사용할 수 있습니다. 선생님들이 이 자료로 교재도 만들 수 있습니다. 그런 저작권은 다 풀려 있는 거기 때문에 적극적으로 활용해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
So this is very difficult question to answer because data from our project is vastly used in different industries right now. But when it comes to educational use, there are some certain things to consider. And that's why we are working on developing search engine where you can see distinctive similarity and differences of different languages. And the sample sentences provided by our search engine are enormous. So you can use it for your Korean class or Korean textbook development and other purposes because the copyright is already unlocked for your use.
Yes, question. Good morning. 안녕하세요. My name is Kyunghee from actually an alumnus now of Philippine Normal University. And I would like to ask Dr. D if you were going to also consider other Philippine languages aside from Tagalog, such as Cebuano or Ilocano in your parallel project, as those languages are also part of the family of languages, which is, according to Robert Lutz, the Western Malayo-Polynesian.
지금은 따갈로그만 하고 있는데 다른 필리핀 지역 언어를 또 배우실 건지.
네, 정말 어려운 일입니다. 저희는 필리핀어를 지키기 위해 엄청 노력을 하고 있습니다. 예, 다른 언어에서 자꾸 눈독을 들이면서 필리핀 빼고 이 언어가 좋지 않겠냐 이런 의견들도 있고 실제로 미얀마어가 굉장히 유력했었습니다. 예, 미얀마 사람 중에 한국어 잘하는 사람이 굉장히 많은 지역이어가지고 하지만 저희는 필리핀어를 지키려고 노력하고 있고 그러니까 더 다양한 언어에 대한 연구들은 아마 이렇게 정부의 세금으로 대규모로 구축하기는 어려울 것이고 하지만 필리핀에 대해 관심이 있는 연구자가 한국 내에 많아진다면 분명히 타갈로그어를 넘어서서 다른 다양한 언어에 대한 말뭉치 구축도 이루어질 거라고 생각합니다.
We are really doing our best to protect the corpus project of Filipino, especially Philippine Tagalog, because there was some other languages which wanted to be part of the project, especially like Burmese was very strong candidate as well. So this time we will focus on Philippine Tagalog, and let's see in the future.
So that concludes our open forum session. Thank you very much for everyone who asked their question. And now we'll proceed to our next lecture from Dr. Lee.
Another Dr.
Aldrin Lee.
한국인 리 아니에요. 네, 안녕하세요. PPT 한국어 버전 가지고 있거든요. 혹시 필요하시나요? 네. 클릭. 네. 오케이. Hello, good morning, everyone. So I think I have to present in English. I presented the Korean version of this in a conference last April. So if you're interested to get the Korean version of the PowerPoint, you could download using this QR code. You could also download the full paper because the study that we did has now been published in the Journal of Korean Language Education, so you can download the full paper. I'll also upload in the same folder a previous paper that we did last year. It's a typological comparison of Tagalog, Khmer, and another language I forgot, on word order related errors. So basically, we look into some errors in the translation of Korean and foreign languages in the project. But let me just go back to our paper, our study. The title is a parallel corpus comparative analysis of Korean and Tagalog negation. And I'd like to thank my co-authors, Chon Jion 선생님 from Kangwon National University, who actually suggested a topic. Initially, I wanted to do a typology of errors in the translation, but she suggested that maybe we might need some time to do that. So we just went into the comparison of Korean and Tagalog negation, and also to Ijong Igyosunim for help in the manuscript. Okay, so right. In terms of our research goals, we intended to discuss the different types of closal negation strategies in Korean and Tagalog based on the corpus data. And then we wanted to compare the special grammatical properties of the canonical negators in the two languages. And we also wanted to share our preliminary findings about non-canonical negation that could be inferred from the parallel corpus data. So basically, we looked into the existing literature and tried to do a kind of survey of the existing clausal negation in both languages. And then using the corpus data, we wanted to find out if there are some types of negation strategies that are not canonical, that are not normally classified as a typical form of clausal negation. So if we looked into the previous research about negation in both languages, we could see a huge disparity between Korean and Tagalog. So in Korean, basically the literature has been quite established. We could see some studies that are focused on the structural, basically morphosyntactic and semantic aspects of the negator, especially the most common negators in Korean, which is an, the short form an, ani, and also the long form G-an, right? And also there were studies on the semantic scope of negation and the licensing of the negative polarity item. In terms of the Korean reference grammars, we could see, in Korean reference grammar, they simply enumerate the typical expressions of negation in the Korean language. In Tagalog, negation is quite underexplored. So if we look into the different grammatical analysis of Tagalog, we could see a few only that discussed in part negation. So for example, Schachter and Otanis in 1972 listed different types of negation in Tagalog, negative constructions in Tagalog. Kaufman, in a forthcoming work, included Tagalog in his negation inventories of Central and Southern Philippine languages. And if you look at the works of Kruger and Rakowski in 2002, negation was discussed as part of a broader discussion of the Tagalog phrase structure. In terms of data and methodology, so if we had a concordancing program, I think it could have been much easier. But in the absence of a concordancing program, we used, sorry. Okay, let me start first with the data. In terms of the data, as mentioned earlier by Ijong Higyosunim in her talk, we are utilizing the corpus data of the 2021 Korean Foreign Languages Parallel Corpus project, funded by the National Institute of Korean Language. For more information, Ijong Higyosunim has an article about this, so you could actually check out her paper discussing the project. The phase one of the data from phase one of the project has been released early this year in March. So as mentioned again by Professor Lee earlier, you could actually apply if you wanted to use the corpus for your own research. So that's basically what we did. We also needed to apply for utilizing the data for this particular research. The data available both literary and conversational corpus are available. But for this research, we only use the conversational corpus. It's unannotated, and there are about 106,367 sentences. in varying topics, and also the data source domain, I think everyday life and scenarios. I think the text there got caught. So there are scenarios also involved in or included in the data source domain. And okay. Right. So as I mentioned earlier, was trying to explain earlier about the concordancing program and the lack of that. Because we don't have any concordancing program, we use the examples of use concordance method following Willis in 1998. So basically, the first step is we try to search for the data that actually contain the canonical negators in both languages. So in Korean, we use in the second column, you could see the canonical negators that we use to find the data. And then in Tagalog, in the last column, you will see the Tagalog canonical negators that we use to actually find the data. You will see that we included all alternate forms just to make sure that we actually capture the data. You will see this on the paper, but basically this is like the English version of the previous slide. And then the next step would be, okay, after searching using the canonical negators, we search the corpus index for each type of the canonical negator, and then we copy the concordances to a separate sheet. So you will see we have Excel files that actually contain concordances like this one. And Chon Jiyeon Sonsungnim actually helped me organize the different types of clauses that we gathered. You will see the Korean example in the left column and the Tagalog example in the right column. Okay, you will see also the same on the manuscript. And then finally, due to the enormous number of sentences, I think we have the exact number on the paper as well. For one canonical negator, I think we actually got as many as 3,000 sentences. So it was enormous number of sentences that actually could be considered as negative clauses. So what we did was we employed randomized thinning. So we started with around 40 sentences per each canonical negator. And then from there, we just added whenever necessary. So now let me go to the clausal negation in Korean and in Tagalog. Basically, what we did for each type of negator, we just described the key negators in Korean and Tagalog, and then we highlighted the similarities and any difference that we find. So we classified the canonical negators into 6 types. The first one is the ones that are used in declarative and interrogative clauses. The second one are used in habilitative and potentive mood types of clauses. And then imperative and exhortative clauses, existential and possessive clauses, copular and nonverbal clauses, and finally, the negation used in desiderative clauses. Okay, in terms of declarative and interrogative clauses, we expect, of course, the most basic the most canonical type of negator. So in Korean, as I mentioned earlier, we use 2 basic negators. One is the short form, which is using the adverb an, and the negative auxiliary, which we also call the long form of negation in Korean, that's using a G plus the an, which has its own historical analysis that you could actually read in literature. And then in Tagalog, we have the most common negative particle, which is hindi, that has its short version, di. So these are some examples. In Korean, in the examples 1 to 3, you will find the examples of sentences containing the short form of negation. And in the right side, you will find the examples of sentences containing long form, using long form of negation. They are in Hangul, so I hope that everyone could actually read it. I know that some of you couldn't read it, so please check out the examples on the paper because we actually have the examples transliterated on the manuscript. Okay, so I'll just read one example. In number 1, we will see the use of the short form ans So 이거 옛날 카메라라 주물하면 안 나와. So an there is the negator. And then in number 4 in the long form negation, 혹시 여기에서 신발을 팔지 않나요? So the 지 않아요 there is the canonical negator. In the case of Tagalog, as I mentioned earlier, we use hindi or di plus the clause. So we basically just have hindi in the left occupying or taking the whole clause as its complement. So for example, in number 7, hindi ko gusto ang alak, right? And of course, in Tagalog, we know that pronominals or pronouns actually take the second position. So in these cases, you will see the pronoun taking the second position. So, and then the ones on the right are the Korean translation of the Tagalog data. Okay, so now let me go to the second type. Negating clause is an abilitative mood. In terms of abilitative or potentive sentences, in Korean, we basically use the same strategies. So the canonical negators, except that we are using a different negative particle. For abilitative and potentive clauses in Korean, instead of using an, we're using mot. Okay, so for the short form, we will see the adverb mot being used. And for the long form, we instead of ji-an, we're using ji-mot. Okay, and plus hada in this case. And then in Tagalog, the basic negation used in abilitative and potentive clauses involves, again, the use of the adverb hindi plus the affix that actually encompasses the temporal aspect and the mood of the verb, maka, right? So hindi plus maka plus verb. And also in Korean, we have a negative modal auxiliary that is also used to express an abilitative or potentive meaning in the sentence. That's ulsu opta. And in Tagalog, we also have this version, but it's using the modal adverb puede, or in a more formal form, maaari. Of course, preceded by hindi. So hindi puede or hindi maaari. So examples in Korean, when you're using the short form of negation for abilitative and potentive mood, examples in 10A, 익숙한 것 아니면 잠을 못 자는구나. So 못 자는구나, you couldn't sleep, right? If the place is not familiar. There's actually a term in Tagalog for that, di ba? Namamahay. And then in the long form, you could actually also use the long form in the same sentence. So 익숙한 것 아니면 잠을 자지 못하는구나. Right? yung ji 하는구나. The ji mot there is the negator for this particular sentence. In Tagalog, again, we use hindi plus abilitative verb. So for example, in 16, hindi ko nakalkula. So hindi nakalkula. Nakalkula, 과거 시제. So past, completed completed aspect. So hindi nakalkula ang oras ng pagsusuri sa pag-alis, right? So the 못했네 there is 계산 못했네, hindi nakalkula in Tagalog. And then kung ganun, hindi talaga kayo makakaligo. This one, 미래상, 그죠? hindi makakaligo. So 샤워는 못 하겠네요, right? In Korean. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in Korean, the abilitative form could also be expressed by using ulsu opta, which is the opposite, negating ulsu 있다, right? So, for example, in number 18, 나도 믿을 수 없어. Right? In Tagalog, it's also used, it's translated as well, using hindi plus the abilitative verb, which is using the affix maka and its derivations. Looking at the translation, I was quite happy with the translation. I felt like, okay, the translators actually did really well. And then in Tagalog, again, there's a way to express impossibility as well. And this is similar to the Korean ulsu opta, right? So we, as expected in Tagalog, we translated the Korean ulsu opta using the modal verb puede, which has its own formal version, maaari, And if you use pwede in Tagalog, hindi pwede, the verb would actually revert to infinitive form. So, for example, in number 21, hindi kami pwedeng tumanggap ng 6 na tao dahil sa social distancing ngayon. So, weird kapag ang verb mo ay kukuha ng ibang aspect, right? So, it has to be, or kung ang verb mo ay inflected for various grammatical meaning, dapat nasa infinitive form siya. So, pwede rin ang medyo formal version, like ang mga lumang kwento, hindi maaring maging mas kawili-wili. Mas formal talaga yung tono niya. Okay, and now we go to negating imperative and exhortative clauses. So, imperative is myung-myung in Korean, and exhortative is whenever you're giving advice or warning, right? So, maybe kwongo in Korean. So, in Korean, we use G malda, right? I think you will hear a lot G maseo, G mayo, right? That particular negative auxiliary verb is the negator for imperative and exhortative clauses. In Tagalog, we have a separate negative adverb for negating imperative and exhortative clauses, and this is wag or wag. Okay, so we look for sentences containing both wag and wag. So as expected, again, in Tagalog, sentences that contain wag, for example, number 25, wag ka masyadong maagang dumating. Okay? Wag kang masyadong maagang dumating. In Korean, their translation is, as reflected, use the long form of negation and using the negative auxiliary verb malda, right? G malda. So the example number 25 in Tagalog, wag ka masyadong maagang dumating. In Korean, 너무 일찍 오지는 마라. The translation is using G malda. And in Korean, okay, in Korean actually you could see negative sentences that are not reflecting the long form of negation, but only using malda, only malda. So for example, in number 28, 그렇게 말고 포즈를 좀 더 이렇게 해봐, right? So in this case, we checked what the translation will be in Tagalog, and we found that in Tagalog we still use huwag in this particular type of constructions. So for example, in number 28, huwag ganyan, subukan mong mas mag-post ng ganito. So that means that even if the negation of this type of clauses in Korean does not use the long form of negation, only uses malda, in Tagalog we still translate it as wag or wag. Okay? So that means also that in Korean, you could actually have a negative clause only by using malda, even without G malda. Okay, and now we move into the fourth type of canonical negation in Korean, and that's negating existential unpossessive clauses. So if you're learning Korean, you know that there's an existential verb in Korean, itta, and its negative counterpart, opta, right? Itta, opta. That's a very basic verb that learners of Korean would probably learn in their basic level of learning. And so in Korean, the negative verb is opta, okay? And in Tagalog, we use the negative existential particle wala, but we use a linker most of the time to connect wala to the nominal that follows. So, for example, okay, in number 38, wala akong tent, pero may pantulog na bag ako. Okay, so you would see that in Korean, this is translated using opta. 그죠? 나는 텐트는 없고 침낭은 있어. Okay, and another example in number 29, we see the use of linker, ng, walang mga tao. Walang mga tao, kaya nung gagawin mo sa mga bundok. Okay? So, for me, weird yung sa mga bundok, but I couldn't change it because it's the one on the data, right? So, 사람들도 없는데 야산으로 가서 뭐 하게, right? Okay. So again, it's translated using opta in Korean. The third example is actually quite recent, right? 코로나 때문에 안 힘든 사람이 없어. Walang taong hindi nahihirapan dahil sa COVID. So we see the consistent pattern between wala and opta, wala in Tagalog and opta in Korean. Now, the fifth type of canonical negation in Korean is negating copular and nonverbal clauses. So Korean has this sort of copula verb, they say, which is like the one that is used for predicate as predicate of nonverbal constructions, and that's ida, right? So ieo in Korean, when you are constructing sentences without a verb, you use a copular verb called ida. So, mo Aldrin Lee when you introduce yourself, right? So the negative copula is anida, and in Tagalog we don't have that. We don't have copular sentences, right? In Tagalog, instead, we have nonverbal sentences. Okay, we have nonverbal sentences. So in Korean, if the data in Korean has anida or ida, in Tagalog we will revert to the most typical negator, which is hindi or di. Okay, we will see that in the following example. So these examples are in Korean. Again, we use the anida, which is now an independent lexical item in Korean. So in number 43, 톤에 뭔가 있는데 범인은 아니에요. Or 내 말은 그 말이 아니잖아. So, in Tagalog, again, we use hindi. So the nominal predicate of the nonverbal clause remains nominal, and the negation is performed by using the canonical negator, hindi. So it means that in number 46, the affirmative version of the sentence, you just remove hindi. Okay? So drama ito pero bagong pelikula raw ang kinukunan nila. You negate that. Hindi drama pero bagong pelikula raw ang kinukunan nila. Of course, structurally, there might be some difference, and that entails another research. But if you see the translation in Korean, the translation in Korean uses the negative copula anida. So drama는 아니고. Okay, the ani in anigo is from anida. Okay. And finally, we are now in the last type of canonical negation in Korean, and this is negating desiderative clauses. When we say desiderative clauses, these are clauses that that reflect the modal meaning of wish, desire, right? Whatever you want to do. And in Korean, again, this is quite a popular grammatical pattern, right? The pattern used to express your wish or what whenever you want to do something is by using auxiliary adjective go 싶다, go 싶어요. So, 뭐 하고 싶어요. In Tagalog, that is normally translated using the verb, stative verb gusto, right? Gusto. So, if we're going to look at the negative, the negation strategy for these sentences, in Korean, when you're negating an affirmative desiderative clause, you just add the short form of negation, the negative adverb an, plus the verb that carries the go 싶다 inflection. Or another way would be to use the verb plus go 싶다, and then you add the long form of negation. So you can employ both the short form of negation and the long form of negation. In Tagalog, if you're going to negate gusto, you have to use as another negative lexical item, which is ayaw, okay? Or you can negate gusto by negating it using the canonical negator, hindi. So either use ayaw or hindi gusto. Okay. And in Korean, as you would see here, there's another negative adjective that is like the counterpart of ayaw in Tagalog, which is 싫다 or 싫어하다. Okay. So we looked into all these canonical negators on the data. So here you will see the examples of two strategies in Korean for negating desiderative clauses. The one on the left side uses the short form of negation plus the verb plus go 싶다. So for example, 이번 드라마 안 하고 싶어? Or 나도 해산물 안 먹고 싶어. Right? So 안 먹고 싶어. ayaw kong kumain. I don't want to eat. And on the right side, you will see the data that reflects the use of verb plus go 싶다 plus the long form of negation, which is ji anta. So example, 뭐 하지만 이 three를 포기하고 싶지 않나, right? 포기하고 싶지 않아. I don't want to abandon, right? So 포기하다 plus 고 싶다 plus G 않다. And the last strategy in Korean for negating the dissertative clause would be using 싫다 or 싫어하다. So we found both on the data as well. And normally, as we saw on the data, when we have 싫다 or 싫어하다, it somehow most of the sentences would be using a noun or nominalized verb phrase plus 싫다 or 싫어하다. So noun plus 싫어, 그거 싫어, right? Or 그거 하는 거 싫어, like that. So there are normally two types of clauses that would appear. So in number 54, you would see there's a noun here and then 싫어, right? 나도 개구리는 싫어. And then in number 55, you would see that this is actually a verbal clause. 정말 병원에 답답하다, right? 답답해서 있기. So the it there is a verb, and then you nominalize it using 기, and then 싫으네요. Okay. In Tagalog, on the other hand, again, as I mentioned earlier, we use in Tagalog when you are constructing an affirmative, a positive desiderative clause, use gusto or nais. Nais appears in the more formal data. So, for example, and the way to negate this would be using ayaw or hindi gusto. So, we see a lot, actually, we saw a lot of sentences containing ayaw. So we feel like ayaw is quite, robust in the Tagalog data. Or maybe the translators actually prefer ayaw over hindi gusto. Okay? So, for example, in number 56, ayaw ko ng Coke Zero, gusto ko lang ng Coke, right? So, 나는 zero 콜라 싫고 그냥 콜라 먹을래. And then, number 58, ayaw ng biyenan ko ng ganito. Okay, ayaw ng biyenan ko ng ganito. 이건 저의 장모님이 안 좋아하시는 거네요. Okay. Oh, this is the summary of... So, that's the last type of canonical negation in Korean. And then on the paper, you will see the summary of the different clausal negation strategies in Korean. Okay. So now we'll move into some preliminary findings that we have about the non-canonical negation in Korean and Tagalog. So when we see when we use non-canonical negation, we actually just considered the non-canonical occurrence, regardless if the sentence, regardless of the frequency. So even if there's only one or two instances, we included it, and if as long as the sentence evokes negative meaning. And if this negative meaning is attributable to one part of the construction. So we found three types of non-canonical negation in Korean and Tagalog so far, because again, this is preliminary. The first one involves inherently negative lexemes. So the use of words that are really negative in the first place. The second one involving derived negative lexemes. And the third one involved specific grammatical patterns. So evoking negative meaning by manipulating the grammar. So the first one, negation involving inherently negative lexemes in Korean. So in Korean, you would, in Korean, if I would be asked as a Korean learner, what is one of the most difficult things about learning Korean language, that would be the morphology or vocabulary, maybe, 어휘. Okay. For me, that's the most difficult. Why? Because there are a lot of words. For the same meaning, you actually have a number of words that you could use. There's the native Korean word, then there's Sino-Korean word, and for Sino-Korean word, there actually could be different versions of the same word. So in Korean, we have a number of lexemes that have a positive that are lexical opposites, meaning they do have a positive counterpart and a negative counterpart. So one of that would be the the word 틀리다. 틀리다 is negative. It means wrong, but it has a positive lexical opposite, which you know is, do you know? 맞다 or 맞아요, 그죠? So, and another word, for example, in 60 is 결석하다, right? That means absent. So it also has its positive opposite, right? 참석하다, for example. So in this case, you will see that if in Korean, the use of the data actually use inherently negative lexeme, but in Tagalog, if the word does not have like a counterpart word, we revert to the basic negation, which is using hindi, right? So, for example, in 60, the use of 결석하다. In Tagalog, we probably would use the English absent, maybe, no? If we want to negate it directly. But in this case, you could actually, the translation uses the canonical negator hindi. So, 오늘 결석했는데 연락 좀 해주시겠어요? hindi siya pumasok ngayon. That's a translation of 결석했다. And the translation of 틀렸네요 is mali pala ang paraan. So we have also an inherently negative word for 틀리다, which is mali. Okay? Tama, mali. And then for another way, actually, or another interesting word in Korean is moruda. Okay? Because moruda actually is reflected in its negative as a word that is used in negative constructions. It could actually function or manifest differently. And I just like to read that part on the paper because I think it's important to actually cite that one. So, wait a moment. The case of moruda. Okay, so so you will see that moruda here, as its negation function, the data reveals different instances of moruda. So in number 61 here, you would see moruda acting as a negative lexeme and as just a negative word. And then in number 62, you would see moruda as part of the negative auxiliary, which is ul moruda. And then in number 63, you will see moruda as part of a negative auxiliary that is actually a long form, like a long form. A higher verb taking a clausal complement, right? So these three examples reflect the different negation function of moruda. So we expect that because there are three different functions of moruda. In this case, we expected different translations in Tagalog, but apparently in Tagalog, we could see that the translation actually uses the canonical negation, hindi, right? So in number 61, for example, 몰랐네. 예전에는 몰랐는데 계속 모근이 좋더라, right? So hindi ko alam dati. This one is alam means alda, 알아요. So just negate it by using hindi. And then in number 2, uljul 몰랐네, hindi ko inasahan, right? Na makikita ko ulit si Commissioner, again using the canonical negator, hindi. Also in the third one, we use the canonical negator, hindi. Okay. In Tagalog, there's an interesting inherently negative lexeme, ewan. Okay, so we actually found a good number of data that contains ewan, and apparently this ewan is being used to translate sentences that has moruda in the sentence. So for example, in number 64, you would see that in Korean data, 나도 다른 나라도 그런지는 잘 모르겠어. So the 잘 모르겠어, I don't know. So in Tagalog, it was translated as ewan. Ewan ko kung sa ibang bansa din ganyan. And then in number 65, 난 ko'y 눈 감고 있을지도 몰라. right? In Tagalog, it's translated again using ewan. Ewan ko kung pumikit ba talaga ang mga mata ko o hindi. So, an interesting note for ewan, apparently, we only saw it on the data that comes from the speaker, right? So the perspective is always from the speaker if you're using ewan in Tagalog. Well, I haven't checked that for moruda in Korean. Because moruda, technically, you can actually use it with a speaker referring to another subject. So both moruda and ewan actually take an interrogative type of clausal complement. So if you would see moruda in number 63, there's a G here, right? G, chuun G. It's actually like a complementizer in Korean, but normally followed by, it normally carries a Q. We call it a Q feature, a question feature, because the ensuing sentence would be like an interrogative form. Similarly, in Tagalog, if you use ewan, okay, in Tagalog, if you use ewan, normally the complementizer to be used is also an interrogative type of complementizer. So kung, right? Ewan ko kung. Whenever it is used as a higher verb. So in Korean, it is marked by the G, and again in Tagalog, it's kung. Right. Another interesting data in Korean is a word that is similar to shilta or shirohada, but with intensified negative meaning, and that is chilsekeda. So in Tagalog, this is done by doing a full reduplication of the negator, then linking the two with the ligative particle na or na. So for example, in number 66, nan 평범한 건 딱 chilsikine. So in Tagalog, if translated using double, ayaw na ayaw ko ng mga damit na mukhang mumurahin lang. And then number 67, noun and steak chisik, yeah. So ayaw na ayaw ko ng steak na may dugo-dugo pang lumalabas, right? All right, and then the second non-canonical negation in Korean and Tagalog involves negation that has derived negative lexeme. So in Korean, we actually could find some affixes that are rendering negative meaning to the word. So you can actually derive a word and turn it into a negative word by using these affixes like pul, pi, mi, right? And other negative prefixes. But we didn't find robust data for these prefixes. We actually only found data for pul and pi, but not for me. So I think it is not as robust now on the data, or maybe in conversational corpus, because we haven't checked on the literary corpus. In Tagalog, there's no derivational affix that turns a positive or neutral lexeme into a negative one. However, we have a negative polarity item rendering ni. So in Tagalog, you can use ni. Whenever you use ni, you expect the sentence to be negative, right? For example, ni tubig. When I add ni to ni tubig, the next part of the clause should be negative. So ni tubig hindi ko gusto, or ni tubig wala ako, right? So it's a negative polarity item for Tagalog. Okay, in terms of the negation involving specific grammatical patterns, sometimes the negative meaning of the sentence could be attributed to a grammatical manipulation, rather than a distinct functional negator or a negative lexeme. So we found that in Korean, whenever we have a data that contains 좀, the adverb 좀, which actually means a little, plus the adjective 그렇다, or which means to be like that, it normally would express discontent or disagreement. And in Tagalog, the counterpart of this one is using the nominative case mark HH question, like nuga. Sorry, this is still in Korean. The second one, the second type of non-canonical negation in Korean involving grammatical pattern is the use of nominative case mark HH question, like nuga, moga, and odi, plus existential ita, or a positive verbal phrase in the case of 누가. Okay? So whenever you say 누가 있어 or 뭐가 있어 in Korean, that could actually be negative. The meaning is negative. So in this particular grammatical pattern, the ensuing negative meaning is normally an emphatic negative existential. So for example, the use of 좀 plus 그렇다. So in number 76, 그건 파브로는 좀 그래. So the Tagalog translation, tingin ko hindi dapat yan ang kainin. So in Tagalog, it's actually translated as a negative sentence. In number 77, 뭔가 지갑을 비춰서 사려니까 좀 그랬어. In Tagalog, again, it's translated as negative, right? Ayokong bumili ng pitaka dahil may utang pa ako. Sorry, pitaka. Sobrang luma, no? Wallet. And number 78, 버스는 시간이 너무 오래 걸려서 좀 그래요. Right? So you see 좀 그래요, but in Tagalog, again, translated negatively, right? Hindi ganun kaganda sa bus dahil masyado itong matagal. And finally, 창문 안 열리는 거는 좀 그렇다, right? So again, in Tagalog, hindi ko gusto ang bintana na hindi bumubukas. So we see again in Korean, you will not see a negative word. You don't use the negative adverbs, but the meaning actually is negative. In Tagalog, we tried to look into the counterpart data of 좀 그렇다 in Tagalog, and we noticed that the use of medyo plus ganon in Tagalog is also producing a sentence that is translated like 좀 그렇다 in Korean. So, for example, in number 86, medyo ganon nga sa tingin ko rin. Medyo ganon nga sa tingin ko rin. So in Korean, 내가 생각해도 좀 그렇긴 하네. Or parang medyo ganon. So 그냥 그런 것 같아. So it's not like binary negative. It's kind of like in the spectrum. But we could see that there's negative meaning being evoked in the sentences. Number 89 as well, right? If you would see the data, medyo ganon dahil sobrang daming tao. 사람들은 보는 눈이 있으니까 좀 그렇지. And here are some examples using the nominative WH word, 누가, 뭐가, 어디가, plus 있다, or the verb. So, for example, in number 81, 요즘 누가 필름을 취급하나? Wala nang so the translation in Tagalog is more straightforward, right? Wala nang gumagamit ng film ngayon. Okay? And then, number 82, 결혼식 때 안 예쁜 신부가 어디 있니? Okay? Tuwing kasalan, saan ka makakita ng babae kakasal na hindi maganda? Okay. So, again, 누가 취급하나? 어디 있니? 어디 있어? 뭐가 있어? These are nominative WH questions plus verb, but they actually evoke negative meaning. Okay. Again, the translation here is not LTL, it's not one-to-one, but that's what's on the data. Kyunghee Gyosanin mentioned earlier that I'm in charge of I'm doing the kamsu, but I only do kamsu for 10% of the data, okay? So there's 90% that I don't actually see. Okay, and then in Tagalog, we could also see a counterpart of the nuga 있어 or 뭐가 있어 in Korean, and that is the use of the WH word plus yes or no question particle ba. Okay? So, in number 90, for example, sabi ko nga, saan ba may ibang driver na kasing galing ko? Right? So, in Korean, naman ang best driver ga 어디 있다고. Okay? And then number 91, sino pa bang naghahanda ng ganito maliban sa'yo? Right? No, 아니면 누가 이렇게 준비를 할지 모르겠네. Okay? So, we also use that strategy. Not as robust as Korean. Okay, so now we're concluding. I'm going to conclude my presentation for our paper. So we have fairly achieved the goals that we outlined in 1.0 in the introduction. And we've seen that both languages generally employ distinct clausal negators, and differences are largely due to the distinct morphological and word order behavior of the two languages. Although admittingly in the paper, we're not able to fully explain this part, the word behavior of the two languages. But there, again, we have another work that actually built on this one, so you could check that one out as well. The availability of strategies for both languages extend to non-canonical negation. I think it would be really nice to actually fully explore the other types of negation strategies in both languages. And finally, there are aspects of negation that we're not able to examine in this paper, including but not limited to double negation in both languages, negative polarity items, negation within phrases, among others, because we only looked into clausal negation in this paper. Okay, so again, if you are interested to read, you can download via the QR code the full paper. And if you have any question, you can email me, or you can ask now after my talk. Thank you.
Okay, so once again, we're opening the floor for questions. And if you're listening and watching from the live stream, you can leave your questions in the comment section below. So while we're waiting for some comments, I'm just going to read one of the comments from the live stream, commenting that learning Korean as well as doing research on culture is overall beneficial. So that was a comment from JLT C. Lopez through our Facebook live stream. Any question?
하세요. mukhang magtataas siya ng kamay.
You said a while ago that there were some like errors in the translations, right? And I actually saw some that were like quite unnatural. So, do you think what should be done if you were going to research from the data that was derived from the parallel corpus, or how would you fix it if you would have more time or something? Is there like methodology that you could employ or something like that? For example, I also want to ask if you were should the other online teaching, should they be like more delineated? For example, like 적사, 적두사, 정리사, 그리고 한자어에서 그 파생된 단어들, 그리고 increasing. Philippines, like we have pala. From that, should they also be considered, especially on researches like this, and how would they be integrated on these types of research? Because they can't really be connected. And for example, like 그렇긴 하다, 좀 그래 is in Filipino, it's very informal. So it's like parang eme. Like technically, 부어체에서 많이 사용되는 그 표현이잖아요. parang medyo eme kasi. So it's like 어떻게 그 번역할 수 있을지 잘 어떻게 할 수 있을까요?
질문 감사합니다. 우리 학부 졸업했죠, 그죠? 한국 잘하시죠, 그죠? 진짜 자랑스럽네요. Okay, so the question, let me just, for the benefit of the live streaming audience, the question, the first part of the question actually asks if what should be done on the errors on translation. So our paper basically is an analysis that was based on the parallel corpus data. So naturally, we're not supposed to actually change what's on the corpus. We have to analyze what appeared on the corpus. But it's clear that this is a translated corpus. This is not like a transcription of a naturally occurring conversation. So I think that should be distinguished. And if you're interested to do a study about naturally occurring conversation, then I think a separate corpus must be collected using that. Because here, in our data, the naturally occurring conversation is in Korean, but the one on Tagalog is translated data. So I think there must be a distinction that should be made, because the data the Korean data is taken from scenarios, from newspaper articles. So they're kind of like, how they are used in naturally in Korean language. But the one on Tagalog data is really just a translated version of the data. So, but the next part of your question, which is about like the differences in terms of grammatical behavior and especially morphosyntactic behavior, I think these are things that we really wanted to do using this data. So, for example, in terms of the difficulties or in terms of the differences in morphosyntactic behavior, we are intending to do our next one of our next project will be about the typology of errors. So, like a survey of the different errors occurring in the translation that could be heavily affected by these differences. Some of them you mentioned earlier, like for example, the use of pala. You mentioned pala earlier. This is quite interesting because in Korean, there's guna earlier, right? Hanung guna, right? So that's like the the equivalent of pala. But of course, pala could probably evoke different meaning depending upon the context. So that's going to be part of our next project, which is typology of errors. But again, this is looking or examining the translated data, not the naturally occurring one. So I think if we wanted that direction for Tagalog, I think we have to build our own corpus and have it. We must have our own Philippine languages - foreign languages corpus, I guess.
Thank you very much for the questions. Are there other questions about Dr. Aldrin Lee's presentation?
Parang nagtataas siya ng kamay.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, so let's proceed with the awarding of certificates and tokens to our presenters. Thank you very much once again for participating in the open forum. And to wrap up this morning session, we will be presenting Dr. Kyunghee Lee and Dr. Aldrin Lee with Certificate of Appreciation and the certificate reads. This certificate is presented to Dr. Kyunghee Lee and Dr. Aldrin Lee for presenting a lecture titled Korean-Foreign Language Parallel Corpus and the Parallel Corpus-based comparative analysis of non-canonical negative constructions, if I'm correct.
A parallel corpus-based analysis of comparative analysis of Korean and Tagalog.
Thank you very much, sir. Presented on September 4, 2023 as part of the Talks on Asian Languages series of the UP Department of Linguistics. Signed, Maria Cristina Gallego, PhD. Okay, we would also like to present some token of appreciation to our presenters, as well as our guest, Dr. Jung from Kyunghee University, Dr. Aldrin Lee's research collaborator.
Okay.
With that, we formally close this morning session. Once again, thank you everyone for coming and joining in our live stream. Please follow the UP Department of Linguistics and UP Career Research Center in all social media platforms for updates and announcements for further events. Kamsahamnida, maraming salamat.